What if one of the most feared prophecies in the entire Bible has been misunderstood for generations? What if the mark of the beast is not just a dark symbol from a distant future, but a warning about the kind of world that is already taking shape before our eyes? For centuries, the words of Revelation 13 have terrified readers. A mark placed on the right hand or the forehead, a number linked to a beast, a system so powerful that no one can buy or sell without submitting to it. And behind all of it, one terrifying reality: worship, control, deception, and allegiance. But what does this prophecy actually mean? Is the mark something literal, a physical sign, a future technology, a global economic system, or is it something even deeper, something spiritual? Something that begins long before anyone realizes they have already bowed to the wrong kingdom. Tonight, we are entering one of the most controversial and chilling passages in all of Scripture. We are going to examine what Revelation 13 truly says, what the mark of the beast means, why it is connected to worship and economic control, and whether this prophecy points to a future event, a spiritual reality, or both. Before we go deeper, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like and tell me in the comments right now, do you believe the mark of the beast will be something literal, something symbolic, or a combination of both? I want to know what you think before we uncover what Revelation is really describing. Because once you understand this chapter, the real danger may not be what most people think. Revelation 13 opens with a beast rising out of the sea. It is not introduced as a simple political leader, nor merely as a monster of fantasy, but as a terrifying power empowered by the dragon himself. In the language of Revelation, the dragon is Satan. That means the beast is not just earthly. It represents a dark union of political power, spiritual rebellion, and counterfeit authority. Then another beast appears, rising out of the earth. This second beast looks harmless at first glance, almost lamb-like, but it speaks like a dragon. That detail matters. It appears gentle, but its voice reveals its true source. It performs signs, deceives the inhabitants of the earth, and directs the world to worship the first beast. Then comes the image of the beast, the false worship, and finally, the mark. This is where fear begins to intensify. Revelation says that all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, are caused to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and that no one may buy or sell except the one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Then comes the number that has haunted generations, 666. It is one of the most discussed numbers in religious history. For many people, this is where interpretation becomes chaotic. Some see barcodes, others see microchips, others imagine digital identification systems, biometric control, or future global currencies. And while it is understandable that modern readers try to connect prophecy to technology, a serious reading of Revelation requires something more careful. We must begin not with speculation, but with the text itself. And the first thing the text makes clear is this: the mark of the beast is never presented as merely a tool of commerce. It is part of a larger system of allegiance. In Revelation 13, the mark is connected directly to worship. The world is being pressured, seduced, and deceived into honoring the beast. The mark is not introduced in isolation. It appears in the context of submission. That means whatever form the mark takes, Revelation frames it as a sign of loyalty to an anti-God system. That changes everything, because the deepest issue in Revelation is never just economics. It is worship. The buying and selling matter because they reveal the cost of resistance. In other words, the prophecy is not simply warning about financial control. It is warning about a world in which survival itself may become tied to spiritual compromise. And that is why this prophecy is so disturbing. Now, there are several major ways this passage has been understood. The first is the futurist view, which is one of the most well-known among prophecy teachers. According to this interpretation, the mark of the beast is a real and future mark tied to the final rise of the Antichrist. In this view, a coming world ruler or system will require visible allegiance, and that allegiance will be enforced through economic exclusion. People who refuse will be cut off from participation in society. This understanding takes the language of buying and selling very seriously and sees the mark as something concrete, something implemented in history during the final tribulation. This is the interpretation many people think of first, especially when they hear about the end times, and it has strong reasons behind it. Revelation 13 does describe a global system of pressure. It does connect the mark to public compliance. It does describe a moment in which those who refuse face enormous consequences. For that reason, many believers conclude that the mark must eventually have some visible, identifiable, and practical form. But even within that view, caution is necessary. Revelation is filled with symbols, beasts, horns, heads, dragons, lamps, stars. Its language is apocalyptic, which means it communicates spiritual truth through vivid imagery. So even if the mark has a literal future expression, it may still carry symbolic depth far beyond a simple external label. This brings us to the second major interpretation, the symbolic or spiritual view. According to this reading, the mark of the beast is not mainly about a physical object, but about inward allegiance and outward obedience to a system that opposes God. The forehead symbolizes thought, belief, worldview, identity. The hand symbolizes action, labor, behavior, participation. In that sense, the mark represents people who think with the beast's values and act in service to the beast's kingdom. This interpretation becomes even more powerful when we remember that Revelation often presents a contrast between those marked by God and those marked by the beast. Elsewhere in Scripture, God's people are symbolically identified as belonging to Him. The language of the forehead especially recalls biblical imagery of devotion, remembrance, covenant, and obedience. In the Old Testament, God's commands were to be bound as a sign upon the hand and as frontlets between the eyes. That was not just about placement, it was about mind and action, belief and conduct. So when Revelation describes a mark on the hand and forehead, many interpreters believe it is presenting a dark parody of covenant faithfulness. If that is true, then the mark of the beast is not merely a stamp, it is counterfeit discipleship. And that is a terrifying idea, because it would mean the real issue is not simply whether someone receives a visible mark, but whether they have already trained themselves to love what the beastly system loves: power, compromise, fear, and false worship. Then there is a third view, which combines both of these approaches. This mixed reading argues that the mark may be spiritual at its core, but could still appear in a literal and historical form in the final crisis. In other words, the mark would not be meaningless symbolism, nor would it be only a piece of technology. It would be a tangible expression of a prior inward allegiance, a visible act that reveals an invisible loyalty. This view helps explain why the prophecy feels so heavy, because it suggests that the mark is not random. It is the final manifestation of a choice humanity has been moving toward all along. Now let's look more closely at the right hand and the forehead. Why those two places? Throughout Scripture, the forehead often symbolizes the seat of identity, conviction, and declared loyalty. The hand symbolizes action, work, and practical obedience. Taken together, they point to a total claim over the person: what you believe and what you do, what you accept internally, and what you carry out externally. That means the mark of the beast is not described as a casual detail. It is totalizing. This is why Revelation 13 has frightened serious readers for centuries. It describes more than persecution. It describes integration into a false order, an order that demands not just compliance, but devotion. And that brings us to the number 666. What does it mean? Revelation says, "Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. That line has produced endless theories. Some believe the number points to a specific historical figure through ancient numerical systems, such as gematria. One of the most famous examples is Nero Caesar, whose name can be calculated in a way that closely relates to the number in certain forms. This is one reason some scholars believe Revelation was also speaking into the Roman imperial world, where emperor worship, persecution, and corrupt power already foreshadowed the final rebellion. That possibility deserves serious respect. But even if 666 had meaning in John's historical setting, many interpreters believe its significance extends beyond one ancient emperor. In biblical symbolism, 7 often represents fullness or completion. 6 falls short, repeated 3 times. 666 may signify ultimate human rebellion, man raising himself again and again in defiance of God, yet never reaching divine perfection. In that sense, The number becomes a symbol of counterfeit completeness, false divinity, and concentrated rebellion. The beast presents itself as ultimate, but it is still less than God. Always less, always incomplete, always false. That symbolic meaning fits Revelation remarkably well. Still, the passage does not invite reckless certainty. It says wisdom is needed, calculation is needed, discernment is needed. In other words, Revelation does not encourage hysteria. It calls for spiritual perception. And that may be one of the most neglected lessons in modern discussions of the mark. Too many people rush to identify the latest technology, the latest political shift, or the latest social system as the mark itself. But Revelation pushes us to ask a deeper question first. What kind of world produces the mark? What kind of people are ready to receive it? What kind of deception makes compromise feel normal? Those questions matter because the mark is not introduced into a spiritually neutral world. It emerges in a climate of deception. The second beast performs signs. The world is amazed. Power is celebrated. Truth is distorted. Worship is redirected, and pressure increases until people must choose. That is the atmosphere of Revelation 13. So the coming crisis is not just about an implant, a card, a code, or a transaction. It is about whether humanity will remain faithful when false power offers security in exchange for allegiance. And perhaps that is why the prophecy still feels so urgent, because even before the final form of the mark appears, whatever that form may be, the spirit behind it can already be recognized. A world that rewards conformity at the cost of truth, a culture that treats compromise as wisdom, a system that pressures conscience to bow before power, a counterfeit kingdom that imitates what belongs to God and demands the loyalty that belongs to Him alone. That is beastly power, and Revelation warns that it will reach its fullest expression in the last days. So should believers panic? No. Revelation was not given to produce panic. It was given to produce endurance. The purpose of apocalyptic prophecy is not to make God's people helpless with fear, but steadfast in discernment. The chapter is terrifying, yes, but it also reveals that evil is not ultimate. The beast has power, but only for a time. Deception spreads, but judgment is coming. False worship rises, but it will not endure forever. That means the warning of the mark is also a call to faithfulness, a call to resist false worship before it becomes law, a call to love truth before deception becomes normal, a call to belong so fully to God that no counterfeit claim can easily capture the heart. And that leads us to the deepest question of all. What if the greatest danger is not simply failing to identify the mark when it arrives? What if the greatest danger is becoming the kind of person who would accept it because the heart had already surrendered long before the hand or forehead ever did? That is the chilling force of Revelation 13. The mark is not just about the future. It is about who owns your mind, your actions, your loyalty, and your fear. So what does Revelation 13 say about the coming end times? It says a final system of rebellion will arise. It says deception will play a central role. It says economic pressure will be used to enforce spiritual compromise. It says worship will be weaponized. And it says the dividing line in the last days will not merely be political or financial, but deeply spiritual. The mark of the beast, then, is not just a prophecy to speculate about. It is a warning to take seriously, a warning that the end times will involve more than chaos. They will involve counterfeit order, more than suffering. They will involve seduction, more than fear. They will involve false salvation offered by a false kingdom, and only those grounded in truth will see through it. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe the mark of the beast will be a literal visible mark, a spiritual sign of allegiance, or both? And do you think the world is already being prepared for that kind of system? Write your answer in the comments below, because I want to know how you understand Revelation 13. And if you enjoy serious biblical mysteries and end times investigations like this, subscribe to the channel right now and leave a like on this video. Your support helps this project grow and allows us to continue exploring the most mysterious and sobering passages in all of Scripture. Until the next mystery, stay watchful, stay discerning, and never forget, the greatest deceptions do not begin by looking evil. They begin by looking necessary.